So you all know MD. Uh, so they don't directly sell to you.
Yeah.
So that does that make them better than others or worse than others? At least for now. So customer experience. Yeah.
Depends upon
So
the effort.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But yes, you have to make an effort to understand. No, that is actually that is the feedback they got. They got that everything your technology is great, but we are making more effort to understand, you to get to you. Then okay, jokes apart. I think with this panel, let's get into the discussion. Uh, a quick context setting. What do you mean by this? From you know the company which is over inside the infra, but not really selling solutions directly. So, how do you help agility, scalability, and speed enterprise customers? A quick.
Yeah. So first of all, good afternoon. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Uh, See, we have come into the data center space about some 5 years back, and one of the things which we take feedbacks from our customers and partners, and that's where we start building the products that way. It's a grounds up approach we take, and the feedback we had when we came back into the data center space was people were not looking for an incrementalization of performance. People were trying to look for a disruptive. People were asking for high speed, high performance, better memory bandwidth. The subsets of the CPU were getting more important because you may have the best of the CPU, but if you don't have the best of the network, it really does not help in a data center space. So when we built the first line of products, which is called Epic, we made sure that you have all the subsets of the CPU well complemented, and that's where the rise started for us in AMD. We predicted cloud is going to be one of the biggest market worldwide, as well as in India, and we started making products based on their feedback. For example, we were the first to get in 64 cores in a single socket. That itself was something which was very well appreciated by the market. Now, coming on to the performance speed, which was well taken when we started getting into the market, and as you said, sir, correctly, the product. So, product has to be well accepted, product has to have a particular quality, product has to give some performance, and that's what we started delivering, and adaptation started continuously in the market. Agility, I think that has been well discussed a lot in this forum, and it's required at all the layers. I think probably resource, getting the right skill set, looking at the business initiatives each organization has. We have started seeing some success across the board where people started preferring us because we give better scalability, consume less power. We make sure that you have more scalable structure because we can, in a single rack, you can populate more VMs and virtualization environment becomes much easier. So those are the aspects I think which customer were looking for, and we got great response. In last 4 years, I can say that.
Thank you. So let me, ask Mr. Trivedi, start. Uh, uh, from your, manufacturing industry point of view, uh, what is that, that big infrastructure need with all this industry 4.0 people talking about? Uh, what is what is that one driver which is fundamentally changing your infrastructure needs?
See, to my mind, what is happening that in the digital transformation, when everyone has actually embarked upon a kind of a digital initiative, and we talk about like an experience, a digital experience, many a times we forget that the whole digital experience which is coming on the front end side is often killed by the kind of infrastructure you have behind. I'm talking about purely on a technology perspective right now. Okay, you don't have a right bandwidth, you don't have a right kind of infrastructure, compute, processing power, whatever you might do. You don't really focus on that, and the end experience to the customers of those digital applications is actually get compromised. So from that perspective, very important. Of course, like in manufacturing, I'm from my metal and mining resource sector. Infrastructure plays a very big role, particularly when we have underground mines, and we are running a program called a digital mine. So when you do those kind of digital mine concept, the underlying infrastructure is actually quite unique, because in underground what happens is it's very noisy, it's vibrations, in terms of moisture, and the traditional infrastructure components may not work also. Like for example, even GPS don't work, right? The kind of connectivity won't work and all those things. So from that perspective, it becomes very, very important for us. But overall, what is happening that globally the kind of business scenarios is emerging is quite changing, right? And every business has to quickly respond to that changing scenarios, and of course that business processes has to be reimagined to really meet those kind of scenarios, and that makes actually more important for a technology landscape also to really support those kind of a reimagined business processes, right? And that's where I think your topic of speed, scalability, and agility comes into picture.
So, Mr. Senthil Kumar, so yours, while people generally club saying, financial services, there is a lot of difference between a bank. So you will hear that from. So in your case, uh, uh, while it is part of the broader industry, probably it is not as regulated as a bank, but definitely regulated, and probably the transaction volumes are high and the value is low. So what are typical your infrastructure needs, and which could lead you to one of these things or more of these things: agility, scalability, speed?
Yeah, our company, which is Shriram Holdings, a capital of entire Shriram Group. So finance and insurance, both we manage. So the infrastructure plays a major role, and of late, no, the challenge is what is that from the business side or from the application side, we are not getting a proper resources available need, because the business is growing in such a way they couldn't predict, especially post COVID. So what was the gap in that 1 or 2 years? Now we are getting a huge business, and it directly hits the infrastructure. Let it be on the security side or on the server, storage, everything. And the other part is that no, we cannot predict how it is, and if we place the order now, the availability takes a long time. It takes at least 16 weeks or 18 weeks for us. So business side, they are not waiting. So they want the infrastructure to be ready, and that is the area where we are focusing more on cloud, so that we will get the scalability is there and availability, we can do that. And another thing is that on the performance, when we want to increase the performance, definitely cores plays a role. So when the cores are getting added, indirectly the software cost also is getting added. So how, like AMD, if they come out with a solution where their competitors keep on increasing the cores and indirectly it is affecting ours. So AMD is reaching out us now directly to the customer. When you asked initially, earlier they were not directly reaching. Now once they reach, now we can tell to the OEM that we want AMD or like that or Intel or whatever may be. It will be our choice now to demand them and to get it. Earlier they will come with a solution based on the availability, we will be going it. Now we can demand the OEM or the manufacturer to go with a particular processor because of certain reasons. So infrastructure plays a major role now, especially in the digital side.
Okay, that's a great response to. I think I'll come back to you later for responding to that. So let me go to Mr. Malagi. So same question, same very general question, very broad question, but you can choose to answer the way you want. Is scalability, agility, speed uh, in a highly regulated industry? So that's a big filter. So what are your what are your top drivers, top consideration when you look for a slightly long-term infrastructure strategy?
Yeah. Like I was saying, in a banking environment, the demands or the products being offered, they don't vary very dynamically. The demand elasticity of a banking is not so much that we have to scale up and scale down on a monthly basis and things like that. Okay. And secondly, a bank many times takes a call depending on the type of application that we may size up the thing itself for next 2 to 3 years. There are options when we go for monolithic
So
architecture.
predictability is pretty high.
Predictability is high. And his complaint that businesses don't forecast is universal. Okay, no business can do a correct forecast, and that all happens to the sales. That 25% increase in this by 10%, they may materialize, they may not materialize. Okay, but at our level, we can always build in certain level of redundancy, and we know the markets and we know the area that we are operating in. So we'll have to consider the top or the lowest type of variation and size our infrastructure for that type of a thing. Secondly, any infrastructure, it doesn't last for more than 5 years. So naturally, if you are taking care of a bit 2 to 3 years view with some kind of CPU additions, memory additions, etc., that box lasts. And I have seen some boxes that we have been using for 7 years, 8 years also. That happens at different level of CPUs. Coming down to Intel based or AMD based, I think you are in direct competition with Intel. uh, we I don't know, agility or speed or scalability, how much it is a part of the hardware is a big question, because all these things are rather achieved by the virtualizations layer that sit around it. Whether the underlying hardware is AMD or underlying hardware is Intel, VMware or anybody does not make a difference. Nutanix can sit on any platform. So I don't discount that the hardware does play a role, because there has been a time when I bought certain systems purely and based on number of licenses. But the guys have also turned out smarter. They changed the socket-based licensing to core-based licensing. So that advantage is also gone. Otherwise, core-based license would have been, this is a story of 2004, 2002, when a vendor won hands down just because the number of CPUs were extremely low, and the Oracle cost came drastically down. I don't know. At present, they don't talk of socket-based, etc. So they count on CPUs, and everybody is promoting their own virtualization, etc. So, and secondly, there was a discussion about high-speed memory, encryption, etc., etc. I really don't know, unless most of the manufacturers adopt a certain technology, uh, whether only talking AMD will help us.
Okay, so I think you should respond to that, because this has come from two of the panelists.
Yeah.
This licensing cost, because I was about to ask on total cost of ownership, but I think already that question is asked, so you should respond to that.
Yeah, so I think that's a very good question. In fact, when we started this high core count process in the market, there has been hypervisors who earlier were socket based, and the moment they realized that there are more cores in the CPU, and if I stay on the socket base, naturally it's a loss for them from the revenue perspective. But there are still softwares, especially on OS front and all, which are socket based, not from the hypervisor perspective for sure. And we have different products for different markets. For example, if you're looking at database, so naturally, 64 core is not the right option. You got to really look at maybe an 8 core with a high frequency. So we have products for that market, which is a different product to be sold in that market. So different SKUs for different market is what we have differentiated very well. But the other part is, even if you take an hypervisor license, for example, take an example for the discussion, say VMware. A lot of people still buy a 20 core, 24 core CPU, whereas the license is for 32 cores. So naturally, what you guys doing is you're putting a full bus, but it's not full, right? So you have 20 passengers in a bus which can carry 32. When we offer 64 cores in that segment, then the license cost gets more optimized. You can have more VMs out from that machine. And what happens, a lot of times, we had discussions with customers on refresh, and they were saying, no, my hardware is, let's say, 3 years old. I look for refresh 2 years from today. Why do I refresh? Let's work and stay on for 2 years from now. Yeah, but even when we had this discussion on total cost of ownership for the customer, there are a few who moved back and said that, okay, fine, let me start working on the refresh within 1 year before itself I was supposed to do. Because, power, real estate, and that's one biggest cost, and the operational cost of the data center. So, example, if you have a data center having about 10 servers or a 10 rack, and if I can get it done in 2 servers or 3 servers because I have more core counts, I give you more memory bandwidth, your IOs are not choked. That's where they start seeing, we had a customer who was buying a 4-socket product in the past, and suddenly when we came up with this 64 core, he said, I'm good with 1 socket. Why do I really need to buy a 16 core into 4 kind of a concept? Because finally, it's not just the acquisition cost where you look for TCO, it's the running cost. And that cost for next 3 to 4 years, if you're able to push it down to close to about 30-35%, that's a big saving. And that's where, a lot of customers really started appreciating us that, okay, so this is something which you guys are delivering with. The second point, I think, very well said, was about security. So, we're the only guys who offer security at silicon level. So that's something which we still seeing some of the cloud customers really using that technology. It's very simple. On a short note, data is at rest in your drive. You encrypt it. You're safe. You're quite secure. Data is on the network. You use firewalls. You use VPNs. You make sure that your ways and means of protecting that data. But when data is in use, which is in a memory, it's really vulnerable. A lot of issues are coming up because of that, in the market. Whether it's cold burst or whether it's Spectra, meltdown, a lot of issues customers had where even they had to shut down hyper-threading in our competitor product just to get out of that scenario. What we do is we real-time encrypt your memory. And there's no application update to be required or there's no compilation to be required. It's just a click of a mouse on the BIOS. You just switch that on a feature or switch that off. Now, people ask us if you do encryption, it adds to latency, it adds to overhead. The beauty is we have a small ARM-based processor within our CPU, which is like CPU and CPU. That does the task. We don't use x86 CPU cycles for this. So there's no overhead from the CPU perspective. There's a 2 or 3% of overhead on the memory because all this is controlled by the memory controller. So yeah, there is a bit of error. But when you look at what you get out of that, a little bit of overhead, but you get secure data when in use. So that's where something called confidential VM, confidential computing has started. And we are the hardware guys who push this. And it's all the feedback from customer. We realize that this is something going to be of real meaningful stuff for customers. A lot of BFSI customers, for example, anybody can take the dump of the memory and it's all text. You can read it out and see what it is. Even the passwords kind of stuff, at times is not so, if an administrator is not good, so it can be, vulnerable. If it's encrypted, you can't even use it. So that's the kind of security level we are trying to.
Quickly, one question. One is, of course, the power consumption. Okay. And when it comes to power consumption, there are two things. Okay. One is the immediate cost, which is probably what the business have looked for. But slowly but steadily, the voice about, larger carbon footprint, future plans, ESG, things are becoming important. So my question to all of you, you can take one by one. How important is that in your industry? Cost, of course, is any cost is.
I think it's no more a kind of choice, sustainability, right? It's a kind of a way of life or going to be a lifestyle, right? And that will be, every organization in some or other way started this journey. This is a buzzword. So I think, not me, but I believe for everyone over here, industry, the sustainability is actually very important. And the carbon footprint plays a very important role, right? Particularly resources, again coming to my sector, I mean, we are one of the major contributor to the carbon generation, right? So for that, even more important. So yes, very important.
So, yeah, good.
No, definitely we have to see that. So from data center side, now earlier they were telling that how many number of racks, if we have more racks, we are handling so many applications. But now it has come down in such a way that reducing the racks and increasing the performance so that power also will come down and indirectly carbon emission also will get.
Well, that is not necessarily true, but yes.
No, why I am telling is that the technology itself is changing. Like suppose like a HCI type of solution where I can bring everything together, like my networking space. So if you think on even the earlier we were having one full rack of storage. Now it has reduced in such a way that 3U, and I have brought all the latest hard drives which are SSDs or NVMe. So those things and all is indirectly helping me. My power has come down, the usage.
But are you doing some kind of measurement of that?
See, definitely it will be there because we are paying the data center based on the power utilization.
Okay.
So once the racks, say some high density rack, if I'm having so many numbers, when the technology and the products are getting reduced, obviously the consumption and these things also is coming down.
So what would you, Mr. Miller?
I think in the space of storage there is absolute improvement. I mean, I have seen racks and racks of storage getting reduced, but that is basically because the base infrastructure, base technology itself has changed. I mean,
Right,
from a
right, right.
spinning disk, when you move to an SSD, the power consumption drops. So that kind of innovation is certainly helping. And storage was one of the, in fact, that was one of the highest guzzler of power in the data center, followed by any standalone machines, superclusters kind of a thing. But reducing the rack is not necessarily reducing the power, because I have seen rack density. We used to calculate 3 kilowatt per rack, and now it is going up to 12 to 16 kilowatt per rack, etc. But doesn't mean that it has gone. I mean, linearly it has also increased. Probably there has been some decrease because of efficiencies in this thing, etc. But now we are faced with the cooling technologies with this density. How to cool a rack is another becoming a problem. But I can safely say that if you calculate watts per every type of processing cycle, definitely there has been a reduction in the watts per computational cycle.
So that is the perfect thing to end, and you can comment on that.
Yeah, so I think we play, being a processor guy, we play a very important role in that segment of sustainability. And we have a quantifiable numbers which we have shared with the market as well. So we call it a 30 into 50, 30 cross 50 initiative. So what does it indicate is we're going to be close to about 30x better efficient processors by 2025 in terms of artificial intelligence workloads, high performance computing, as well as over accelerators, which we're going to sell in the market. And guess what? So if you look at the industry standard, we are 2.5x better than the industry standard. So naturally, we're going to look for making much and much better efficient process by 2025. The other part is what do we do internally as AMD operations? We already started using renewable energy in multiple offices across, even in India. That's what one aspect what we are doing. And we're looking at reducing the power consumption, or what you call it as green gas, by close to about 50% by 2030. So that's an initiative I think we are at par. And the baseline is 2020 versus 2025 and 2030, what we have set for ourselves. And we're well on track, on that space.
Thank you, and thank you all the panelists.